You're live.
Well, welcome everyone to another episode of WA This Week. And look, missed last week. I took a week off, which was a bit of fun. And for those of you that are keen on my Facebook page, you'll see that I had some fun doing some maintenance work, or at least trying to recover an old Nissan G60, a 1964 Nissan four-wheel drive, their first sort of modern four-wheel drive, which was good fun. And I enjoyed that. But look, getting down to serious matters of politics, I don't think any of you could have escaped the debacle that we're continuing to see with the government's Aboriginal cultural heritage new laws and regulations, and the impact that that's having in our community already. And look, there is enormous consternation in the community generally. One of the things I do when I go down to the bush, it's a family farm down at Cranbrook, where I do my maintenance activities. I talk to a lot of the farmers, and look, I can just say every single person I spoke to, whether they worked in a shop, whether they were a farmer or whether they were a contractor, is desperately concerned about how these Aboriginal cultural heritage laws are going to affect their business and how difficult it's going to make for them, and just the fear and uncertainty. And the reason they're fearful, as I pointed out to you before, is that there are enormous penalties, multi-million-dollar penalties, and jail time up to years for anyone that falls foul of these new laws and regulations that have come out. But what did we see come out in the press? I mean, two separate tree planting events, so community groups where volunteers have got together to plant trees, and in both cases those events were stopped. And in one of those cases, what was very clear was that there was money at the centre of that being stopped, and that is a particular Aboriginal corporation, or at least a representative from it, believed that all of the money for the restoration activity of the wetlands should be going to that corporation, and that under the Aboriginal Cultural Heritage Act and regulations, they could stop that activity going ahead and demand that the money be paid to them. Now, that is just, a really unsatisfactory. And can I say, this is precisely the issue I raised in debate in Parliament. I was one of two members on our side in the lower house that participated in the entire debate for this bill, and then also what's called the consideration in detail, examining the bill in detail. And it's exactly the point I raised, and that is, this is a new law and new regulations that it can institutionalise conflict, but in particular, it monetises conflict. And that is, that's not protecting Aboriginal cultural heritage. I think, as I've said, everyone, I think, recognises the importance of protecting Aboriginal, significant Aboriginal cultural heritage, and making sure that we don't see that harm. We see it preserved for future generations. That's important to everyone in society. But what you've got in this new law and these regulations is that you've monetised conflict, and that is, if someone objects to something, they can then derive money by being paid compensation, outside of if anyone actually inadvertently damages Aboriginal cultural heritage as it's defined, that they end up with massive fines and potential jail time. So, the government we asked the government to delay the implementation of these new regulations and the law. They refused to do it. They need to urgently review how this is being applied. And I think there's been some commentary in the West today on this. And I think the view that where you've already extinguished native title and where it's freehold land, I think we need to see some differentiation between that and Crown land, which is where traditionally Aboriginal cultural heritage has been most at the fore. So hopefully the government sees good sense here. Minister Booty needs to urgently reconsider what he's decided to do, and urgently make changes to get certainty, and so that we don't see events like we saw last weekend, where significant community events are unnecessarily held up. Exciting time, Rockingham by-election. Ex-Premier McGowan's resigned, and now We're going to have an election for Rockingham in a couple of weeks. And, this is a great opportunity for the people of Rockingham to send a message to the government that they're not happy. They're not happy with massive waiting times to get into hospital. They're not happy with the deterioration of law and order in their community. They're not happy with the fact that their schools are being provided with teachers who aren't fully trained because they've failed to provide teachers for the schools. But more particularly, and I know this because I've spent time down at the pre-poll booth at Rockingham, Labor supporters in Rockingham are deeply unhappy about the way the candidate for the Labor Party was selected for that election. And what was it? It was a head office captain's call. And that is, we're led to believe that the former Premier believed that the current Labor candidate should be the person that was chosen. And that person, I'm sure that person's, a good enough person in many ways, but very young. And what's their background? What's their experience? Have they gone out? Have they worked in a union? Have they worked out in a workplace? Actually used their hands to do something? Have they had experience in starting their own business? No. Someone who's only effectively worked in Labor Party offices, worked in the Labor Party head office. Now there was another person who's running for that election as an independent, who was overpassed. This was someone who worked in the military, was in the military, then has gone out and started their own business, and that person was overlooked by the Labor Party. And what the Liberal Party is presenting down there is an outstanding alternative candidate. This is the chance for the people in Rockingham to send a message to this Labor government that they're failing on so many fronts, but also they've failed in picking the right candidate for that seat. Now, Peter Hudson is the Liberal candidate, a really fine young person who's has gone through university, got a law degree, gone out, started his own business, and someone who's part of that community, deeply cares about it. And this is a chance for the people of Rockingham to send a message that they don't want apparatchiks, they don't want, for want of a better word, Labor hacks just going into a seat in Parliament because they've been anointed by head office. You want people that care about the community, are there for the community, and have actually gone out and, made something in their lives before they come into Parliament. So I think that's a good chance to do that. And I'm going to be spending a fair bit of time down at Rockingham, as with my colleagues will be, because we are determined to give the people of Rockingham a real choice. And we're deadly serious about this. Peter's an outstanding candidate, and we are going to do everything we can to present our credentials and say that we should be representing the people of Rockingham. So look out for that. If you're from Rockingham, please get the message out, and please give Peter your support. Look, interesting. I like, occasionally touch on, federal topics, but this one has a big impact on the state as well, and that is the federal GST deal. My colleague Dean Smith, he's an active guy, Dean, and he really likes to dig in there and get to the facts. And one of the things he said to the federal government is, will you please share the correspondence that you've had with the Labor state premiers on the GST deal with the state? Because we constantly hear this chatter coming, particularly from the eastern states, that the other state premiers want to attack the GST deal. And, just to reprise it, I've talked about it a couple of times, we're only getting 70 cents in the dollar. That will go to, I think, about 75 cents in the dollar, thanks to the arrangement that was put in place by the former Liberal National Coalition government and facilitated by Senator Smith and his other parliamentary colleagues from Western Australia, who were wonderful advocates for Western Australia having a proper GST deal. Now, Senator Smith said, listen, can you share that correspondence? We need to know what's going on. What did the Labor government do? Same sort of transparency we don't see from this state Labor government. They simply refuse to provide and share any of that detail, any of that information. Now, I think that's your right to know. And I think the public around Australia have a right to know what the other premiers are trying to hatch up with the federal Labor government. And let's be very clear here. I've seen some sort of headlines and some various stories saying, the federal Labor government have given some sort of guarantee in relation to Western Australia's GST arrangement, which still means by some considerable distance, we receive the smallest share of our GST that's paid in this state, of any state in Western Australia. We are still massively subsidising all of the other states in relation to GST. And what have they said? Has the Treasurer, the Federal Labor Treasurer, or has the Labor Prime Minister, have they said that they will guarantee to at least maintain, that is, make it either maintain or make it better, the current GST arrangement? Have they given that guarantee? No. They've simply said, we'll make sure that Western Australia is treated fairly, or they've used weasel words to that effect. And they are weasel words. Make no mistake. These are senior and experienced politicians. They choose their words carefully. No senior federal Labor politician has guaranteed that Western Australia will continue to maintain the current GST arrangement, or that they will improve that. So until we hear that from them, we know that the GST deal and the GST share that Western Australia gets is at risk. And that's important, critically important for this state, because that money is the money that enables us to not only deal with the normal things of law and order, schools, hospitals, and the like, but it's also enabling us to put in the infrastructure for the future jobs in this state and develop our economy even further and make Western Australia a more vibrant state. So, Senator Smith was very proper in the way that he asked. It was just disgraceful that we've got a federal Labor government following the copybook of the state WA Labor government. No transparency, no honesty, if you like, in revealing what's been discussed, but also, and mark my words, we have had no guarantee from Labor to maintain the current arrangement or improve it. They've used weasel words, and that worries me a lot. So don't accept the reassurances, and those of you that are keen Labor supporters, go and tackle your own members and ask them for that guarantee for Western Australia. Just a little topic I want to touch on. I touched on last time this issue with infill. We had a community forum on that in my electorate. I got out of the blue. I got contacted by a very concerned group of residents from Scarborough. And you know what? Exactly the same concerns there. And in fact, there are concerns all over metropolitan Perth. Anywhere that's on the ocean, anywhere that's got a river view, or anywhere where you've got a suburb like Mount Lawley, which is one of the more attractive areas that people like to live, they are massively under threat and are being actually, in fact, damaged by completely inappropriate infill, which has been approved under these shoddy processes that the Labor government have put in, which just gives effectively developers carte blanche to do whatever they like, regardless of what a community thinks. I'll be working with those people in Scarborough. That is a seat that the Labor Party holds, and they are simply ignoring those residents and ignoring their concerns about infill, which is now just not on the beachfront, but moving right back in to the suburban area, ordinary suburban streets. So a couple of individuals are making a big profit. Meanwhile, you're destroying the amenity and the property value of a whole heap of people that are affected by these developments. Houses that, you've now got houses that don't get any sunlight effectively past midday. They are in shade, complete shade from midday by these large-scale apartment buildings. So an area that is evolving, and look, I'll be working with those groups right across Perth, can I say, because this Labor government, they think they can get away with this. They think they can do what they like with their massive majority, and they think to gratify a few donors, who are developing, they can do what they like in relation to planning approvals. Well, I think they've got a big surprise coming their way come the next election. Look, other than that, thank you very much for listening to WA This Week. Don't forget, you can subscribe to the podcast on any of your favourite applications, and please share it, and also please give us any comments. Always welcome your comments and feedback. And look, we're live, and I think we can take questions if there are any questions, and if there aren't, thank you very much.
Yeah, we have a couple of questions. One comment from someone that I think you'd probably want to respond to, which says, it's the No Party, sorry, the LNP. which I guess he's referring to the No campaign.
Yeah, well, look, I've been pretty clear on this, and that is that I think that the so-called voice referendum should fail, and I hope it does. I hope for Australia it does. I hope for ultimate reconciliation it does, because there are two parts to the question that's been put forward. One is the recognition of Aboriginal people as the first peoples of Australia. I've been very clear that's logical, and however you put that in the Constitution, there was some discussion some time ago that you recognise that in the preamble. I don't think anyone has any contention with that, and the Liberal Party and I think the other parties have all indicated that they support that. However, the idea that you have a completely separate group in the Constitution, and just be very clear here, it will be a separate part of the Constitution. Now, I'm not going to go into constitutional law. I'm not a lawyer, but I do have some understanding, or at least I recognise the logic of the argument that people make in relation to that. As soon as you put that into the Constitution and as a separate section, that is something that is used as a lens to interpret everything that happens in terms of legislation and government decisions. And that is not done through Parliament, it's done through the courts. And because it's a separate section in the Constitution, it automatically gives it a status equivalent to the parts of the Constitution that deal with Parliament, that deal with executive of government and the like. So, this is no small thing. It is a major thing, and you are formally saying that there are two Australians who have different rights. There are Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal Australians. I find that fundamentally offensive. I do not accept that should ever happen. I'm a great believer in an egalitarian society where we have equal rights, equal opportunities. If this goes ahead, if this voice referendum goes ahead, that will no longer be the case. I think that's a tragedy.
All right. Do you have any opinions on Victoria canning the Commonwealth Games?
Yeah, look, I do. What a shoddy way to do it. Imagine getting 3 years out from a major event like this, where organisers are making arrangements. Athletes, many of you would know, some of you may well know athletes who train. Athletes don't train for a few weeks before these games. Athletes, plan their training years ahead. And they are tapering for it. And of course, the Commonwealth Games is 2 years before the Olympic Games. So the Commonwealth Games is just a fantastic way for athletes from Commonwealth countries to actually prepare for the Olympics as well, because they get that chance to compete with, the highest, caliber athletes from around the world. The Commonwealth countries span the globe. I mean, the single largest country in the world, India, is a Commonwealth country, and they're one of the participants in those games. So imagine just pulling the rug out, and this fantasy that it's a $7 billion project and that's what it's going to cost. I was looking it up. The Birmingham Games, the last Commonwealth Games, they spent $677 million on that. Now, I think this is a national shame. I think it's a national embarrassment that this has happened. It will harm Australia's reputation. The other thing is, I can't believe it's beyond the wits of Australian states to get together and actually put up a proposal collectively that would enable these games to go ahead. Look, Western Australia, for example, we have what is recognised, I think, by people as the best stadium in the world in Optus Stadium. We have Olympic class rowing facilities. We have Olympic class athletic facilities, a new athletic centre. We've got a fantastic velodrome out at Midland. The truth is that in Western Australia, there are many, if not pretty well all of the sports in the Commonwealth Games where we have outstanding facilities, and those facilities could be used for that. You don't have to go out and build a whole range of new stadiums, and equally you can have novel arrangements for housing and so on. It might require a little bit of lateral thinking, but how about a combination of states? I mean, the fact is you could hold events in different states quite readily in Australia, and that would significantly simplify the whole process. So look, I'm not an athletics games organiser, quite clearly, but I think the way the Victorian government's handled that is disgraceful. If this was going to be their position, then that decision should have been made years ago. to leave the organisers in the lurch. And I think the Commonwealth Games is a really critical event. I actually really enjoy the Commonwealth Games. I think most Australians enjoy the Commonwealth Games as well. They enjoy seeing them going ahead, and I think it gives our athletes the opportunity to test themselves on the world stage.
So do you agree with Roger Cook saying he wouldn't step in to save the Commonwealth Games?
Look, I think this is, just to give a glib sort of, oh no, we're not going to do it because we're spending money on other things. I mean, this is a government that have wasted billions of dollars, on a transport project, MetroNet. It's blown out from $3 billion. I think it's heading towards $12 billion now. Now, do I think Western Australia should be spending billions of dollars on it? No. But what I've indicated to you is I think that with a very small amount of lateral thinking, Western Australia could work with other states, and maybe it could do it itself, but they could work with other states to see whether Australia could host the Commonwealth Games, and that we use existing facilities. But at least give it a try, Let's see if that's possible. If we can do it at low cost, I mean, clearly we don't want to bankrupt the state, and we know, as I point out to you, lots of problems in the state. But I think there is an opportunity to do that, and I don't think the Premier should have just dismissed it out of hand. It has been, I've seen this put around on social media and otherwise, that actually we've got wall-to-wall Labor governments now on the mainland states. And they're great left-wing ideologues. They hate the Commonwealth. They really have this sort of self-despising attitude towards the fact that they're part of the Commonwealth nation, or that Australia was settled, with European settlement and so on. And somehow they want to unwind all this. And part of this is to, really undermine the whole concept of the Commonwealth. And the Commonwealth Games. Look, I hope that's not true. I have a deep concern that actually there's a grain of truth to that this is a bit philosophical and not necessarily practical. But look what's possible, and I think with some lateral thinking you could do, we could certainly play a significant role in the Commonwealth Games, even if we just hosted it with a couple of other states.
All right. Rohan asks, if you could give a piece of advice to a young person wanting to enter politics, what would it be? Get involved with a political organisation of your choice, because it's funny how often people are genuinely who get into politics, or generally who get into politics, are people who are concerned about their community. So often they'll be at school, they'll be on school council, or they'll be in a leadership role, and then they might sort of get involved in local government and those things. So I think being involved in a political party is a good idea, and choose one that you like. It's funny how often, or interesting I think at least, how often people will get involved in a political party and then they go, oh, actually, yeah, I'm interested in my community, but this isn't quite right for me. And it may take them a little while to find the organisation that aligns with their views. The other one I would say is don't get too seriously involved too young. I think it's a big mistake. I mean, this was, my criticism of Labor and the candidate they selected for the by-election in Rockingham, and then they've chosen someone now. Whether that candidate's a good candidate or not, very young, and has essentially only worked in Labor Party offices. I mean, that's no basis, I think, for someone to come into Parliament. I think, get involved in an organisation, learn about it, see if it matches your values. I like the Liberal Party, obviously, but that's, I accept that that's not everyone's cup of tea, and you may have other political views, but otherwise, go out and, get out and get some experience in the world. Look, that might sound like sort of a cliched view to some, but I think it's absolutely critical. I mean, I see these people that are in Parliament who've never done anything but politics. They have a really, really narrow, skewed view of the world, because it's one where they sort of focus in on a particular set of political beliefs. Get out there and look at the world, and then come into politics proper. Steve asking a question that might not be your area of expertise, but here it goes. It says, Bitcoin is going to underwrite US dollars, but not oil?
Yeah, look, I don't know. I'm pretty clearly I'm not a financial expert, and look, don't follow my financial advice. I would be my suggestion. I think if I'm buying shares, you should sell, and if I'm selling, you should probably buy. But look, in relation to that,
Look, my concern with cryptocurrencies is pretty straightforward. It all sounds very exciting, and I know a number of people who have invested in them and so on. But intrinsically, if you look at our monetary systems, they've been based on a state. So in case of the US dollar, it's the US dollar or the English pound or the Australian dollar and like. But at least you have there's an ordered regulatory framework behind that. My concern with the cryptocurrencies is that it's outside all of that regulated framework, and to a degree it's a Ponzi scheme, isn't it, that you've got these currencies being bid up. I will also say that these cryptocurrencies are very much a facilitator for illicit transfer of wealth around the world by criminal organisations and the like. And to a degree that may underpin part of their value. So, I'm a bit sceptical about them, but, I read lots of stuff about this and people say it's the future. Well, I'm a bit sceptical. And you can see increasingly that sovereign nations are becoming very concerned about this. I think you ultimately are going to see a lot of formal regulation around cryptocurrencies, so perhaps they won't be the sort of libertarian means of trade that people think they'll be in the future.
All right, we have a series of questions from Love My Mother Nature on TikTok, but it's too many, so I'll just ask the first couple. This is in relation to the infrastructure for the Commonwealth Games. She says, it's highly embarrassing. We just need a new pool. We have a brand new track and Optus Stadium can do everything else, but we need a new pool.
Look, possibly. Certainly Challenge Stadium is an excellent facility, and, in fact, it's one of these things you take for granted when you live in Perth, that you've got swimming pools in most of our major sort of centres within Perth. There are really high quality Olympic swimming pools. And Challenge Stadium is a very impressive complex in relation to pools. So, but look, I'm not an expert in that clearly, so you'd need those people that are experts there. But I think we've certainly got the kernel of a facility. And look, as I say with this, I wouldn't be in favour of, some multi-billion-dollar package where, you have to go out and build a whole heap of new facilities. But as you've indicated, we have really excellent. I mean, Perth is absolutely blessed with world-class sporting facilities, from rowing through to athletics and elsewhere. So we are well placed, and as I say, there are people who are far cleverer at this than I'll ever be, but it strikes me that Western Australia could possibly do something at very low cost, but in particular, if we partnered with 2 or 3 other states, then I can't comprehend that we would have to spend, as a nation and as individual states, spend a lot of money to have a fantastic Commonwealth Games.
Okay. Now that Australia has rocked the Commonwealth boat, do you think next time that the decision for an event in Australia and Games will be affected by issuing boards when applying?
Look, I think it's, again, make it very clear, as I've made clear, this is not my sort of hood. But I think one of the things I have made as an observation is that increasingly there's consternation that these events are getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think that, I'm a great believer in living within your means. And, maybe it's that the events have to be retailed. I mean, with the Olympic Games, they're getting fewer and fewer nations bidding for them, for example. And there have been a lot of thought about, do you just make it a permanent, games in Athens or somewhere in Greece, because of that escalating cost issue. So I think there does have to be a review of sporting organisations in terms of escalating cost. But on that basis, I think, make the games more accessible to more countries and more nations, more states. And that will make sure that they're sustainable into the future.
All right, that's the end of the questions.
Okay, beautiful. Well, thanks very much, everyone. And as I say, look, please share with your mates and your friends. Good to get the message out. And otherwise, thanks for your feedback and thanks for those people who ask questions.